if you ever wondered what Predator 1 and 2 would be like if it starred an old man and was directed by the guy that gave us The Exorcist, then the answer is probably The Hunted, and we're going to talk about it. Now, I think this should be a start of another series. That's right.
You
One
mean the
millionth
ones that we haven't
series.
continued?
But I think this is a good idea for a series also, in conjunction with all the other great ideas that we've had.
Yeah.
And I'm going to call this, tentatively, I'm going to call it Should Be Cult Classics. You know, because there's a lot of movies out there that still haven't gotten an audience despite being out for like a billion years and being pretty awesome. Now, here's the catch to this series. You will have not seen these movies, with the exception of a few. And we'll go back and visit them, and then I'll get your thoughts on it, whether you think it should be or should not be a cult classic. I will have be going into this thinking this should be a fucking cult classic at the very least. So, I just showed you The Hunted. I saw this movie back when it came out in the theater.
Mm-hmm.
And the person that was with me was not too enthusiastic about it. Didn't hate it. He was like, yeah, it was alright. And I got out going, that was fucking cool as shit. Or was it just me? And then I never revisited it. Like ever. Until today. Because, found out it was on Hulu. So I was like, gotta revisit that.
Yeah,
but it always left an impression on me. Like, I always would be like, damn, I remember that shit, and I remember this, and I always wanted to revisit it. But now we have, in fact, done that. Just first impressions, what did you think?
I liked it.
This non-committal, I liked it.
I didn't know there wasn't a cult classic. I was always under the impression it was.
It's not. I mean, there's obviously people that like it. But
to be fair, I haven't heard really about it.
Yeah, it's so like that audience is so small, and this came from a guy that's considered to be one of the greatest directors of all time. So there's always that he's always under that magnifying glass, under the microscope, if you will, people expecting too much, and it's kind of hindered his career ever since French Connection and The Exorcist. Because, I mean, those two movies are undeniable classics. So ever since then, everybody just compares all his stuff to that. And of course,
Yeah.
Give us the info.
29% on Rotten Tomatoes.
Yeah. Critics were not too fond of the movie.
Roger Ebert did give it a 3.5 out of 4.
Roger Ebert was one of the few people that said, this is fucking badass. But that happened a lot with Roger Ebert for some reason.
Yeah, he's the guy that gave freaking Evil Dead 2.
Yeah. And, but critics were generally, either very dismissive or
It didn't make its money back.
It did not. It was not a hit. It just kind of slid under the radar and people forgot about it. But I always thought it was badass. Now, before we watched the movie, I told you this one of the last few times where Tommy Lee Jones actually could be physically imposing as well as, in terms of his acting gravitas, I guess. And... But, it's still portrayed in a way where, despite that, you still feel the burden of his age. And this was one of those last few times where he could be like an action hero.
Yeah.
But anyway, it was not a hit. It's not really garnered any...
Yeah, it's actually, I'm looking at the reviews right now, and it got shit on, actually. Mm-hmm. People saying that it's just a ramble rehash. Calling it plotless. Scarcely exciting to watch.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, all right. Interesting.
So, taking that into note, I do believe this is a movie people should go back and revisit and just see it for what it is. And like I said, from my point of view, and that's how I remembered it, and upon rewatching it, I was like, that is how it is. We have... It's a structure we've seen before. Yeah, Rambo, Predator.
It's very Predator.
Yeah. It is, above all, a very Predator feel to it.
There was even a part in the movie where, like, there was a musical little cue that reminded me of Predator.
In the third act? Yeah. But the concept is a very familiar one. A soldier who is burdened by what he's done and who cannot stop. Even just recently, Netflix Punisher series had a subplot like that. Somebody that can't turn off their training. And... but I think the movie transcends that with I mean, this is not the only reason it transcends that, but one of the reasons for me that it transcends that is it has this non-overbearing, thankfully, kind of symbolism to it, and it's very simple and it's very barren, and now I'm talking about the Abraham providing the sacrifice of a son to God, and that brings into question doing something for the greater good, no matter what it is, and our main character, Tommy Lee Jones, bears that responsibility that he has kind of shunned his whole time. He has trained these killers, never been one himself, but he has trained them, and now one has gone rogue, so to speak, and he finally has to shoulder that responsibility and do what is right for the greater good, despite, as is revealed at the end of the movie, that he genuinely cared for this person. There was a genuine bond between him. There was love, and of course then we have the wolf also providing this symbolism. But it's all done in a very, I wouldn't say subtle because it's there in front of you. It's obvious.
Yeah.
But it's done, it allows the movie to be a thriller. It's kind of like a bookend. The symbolism is a bookend and allows the movie to be this suspenseful thriller. And I think as a suspense thriller, it works wonderfully, very, very action-packed, but it doesn't resort to camera tricks and all this, bizarre, out of this world fucking action, and it doesn't do any of that. Friedkin has always been a very subdued director, and if anything, a lot of the stylings are still reminiscent of how he worked back in the 70s. Everything feels anchored in reality. The car chase, a great example. It's not, this winding through the streets and stuff, it quickly becomes a foot chase, there's no big stunts, nothing like that. So it feels grounded in reality, and I think it's interesting that at the beginning when we get the background on our villain, so to speak, our soldier gone rogue, played by Benicio del Toro, when we see him in the war zone, that feels unrealistic, which I don't know if you'll agree with that or not, but the war zone is like beyond the war zone. There's like fucking explosions left and right, fire. I mean, of course, war is war, but this is like an insane war zone. But it feeds into that idea that it has completely scarred his mind and his thought process. So when it's brought to this realism or this realistic approach at something like a suspense thriller, it bears an interesting contrast. But anyway, I say all that to say this. Let's talk about the essentials of the movie. First of all, anything you didn't like in the movie?
Well, we'll say this, that the way it's kind of like laid out, it seemed like there was going to be some sort of revelation at some point, and there never was.
About what
what
his mission was?
Yeah, it seemed like he was kind of like, maybe he's not evil. Or like not fully, what he actually is in the movie.
Right.
Especially with his family or the people that he visits at that point. So it kind of seemed like it was headed that way, and then it ultimately doesn't. So I can kind of see someone being like, that was pointless. You know what I mean? But I actually kind of like that.
Mm-hmm.
That being said, it does kind of seem like it's going that way, and then it doesn't. And it feels a little bit weird. But I was fine with it.
Yeah, I think those scenes...
But I could kind of see someone being like, well, that was okay.
Yeah, I know the person that I went with, that was a problem for them. They were like, well, we didn't get to find out what his mission was or the relevance to this or... how this...
It seemed like there was more to what was happening than there actually was.
Mm-hmm.
But I think there's more to it in a different way.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's very intentional. We do get hints of what his rogue actions were and his Black Ops missions were, besides the Kosovo scene at the beginning. But that's not the focus of the movie. The focus of the movie is the relationship between him and the Tommy Lee Jones character. And as a result of that, those scenes serve more to flesh him out as a person that does have redeeming qualities. There's kind of a gentleness to him. And even
which is why that all that stuff kind of lends to the fact that you're going to be like, okay, there's going to be some revelation that like he's not actually
or
whatever.
Especially the way the government agents, or I'm sorry,
especially the way they treat him and all that stuff.
The military agents that come and pick him up and extract him from the situation and basically give him a carte blanche to do anything seem very menacing. Seem very threatening. So it gives the impression
they've done it before and all that.
Exactly.
So you're like, all right, something's gonna happen.
It gives the impression of somebody pulling the strings or somebody having wronged him in a way, but that's not the case. And I think ultimately, at least in my case, ultimately that benefits what the movie ends up being about. Let's say it that way, right?
I'll say that, like, I hadn't seen it before, so I had that expectation. But then when it doesn't happen, there was like a minute of like, oh, okay, I get it.
Yeah, it does.
Like I wasn't disappointed. I was like, oh, okay. It would have been interesting if there was something else, but I kind of understand what was being said anyway, so I was fine with it.
Yeah, and I think,
or what it was, what the story was supposed to be, I should say.
Yeah, I think with those expectations, and really those expectations speak of us as an audience, that we've come to expect a certain structure. And it's funny because the movie is structured in a certain way that's very, I wouldn't say formulaic, but it seems to be formulaic. But ultimately, its end goal is a bit more lofty than that it presents itself as. So yes, a lot of people would have expected something.
Yeah.
This is why I think the movie merits second viewing, third viewing, and that's why I think it should get more of a cult following, because it's not what it gives the impression of being, despite how simple and almost minimalist it is in what it's doing. But yeah, absolutely. But I am glad that didn't cause you to dislike it. So anyway, let's talk about.
No, there was like a couple seconds of like, oh, that's weird.
Yeah, kind of like a coming to realization of okay,
right, yeah.
So let's talk about
because of how much it like it kind of makes you feel like there's gonna be something,
right?
Which I think was intentional.
And again, to just repeat this, that is something we've come to expect of storylines that go in that route. Like again, to just mention the Punisher, because that's the most recent thing. I came to expect an explanation, and I got it. But again, that's, if anything, leaving the Benicio del Toro character a lot more vague, despite everything we've learned about him. Kind of amplifies kind of like that gray area of morality.
Because throughout the movie, I was kind of finding a reason to not like him, because he is weirdly sympathetic in a way. So I was like, all right, or to fully like him, I should say, because I kind of liked him. So I'm like, all right, there's gonna be an explanation that makes me fully justified in liking this character,
or hate him,
Yeah, I was expecting him for it to be justified or whatever.
And
then it's not, and you're kind of like, okay.
And that's the subversive,
that's interesting.
That's the subversive genius of it, because again, we go back to the Abraham thing. Abraham killing his son. It's his son. His son could be bad or good, but he would love him because it's his son. And the reluctance of him wanting to kill his son had to do with the fact, not that he was good or evil, but that it was his son.
Yeah.
So it goes back to that again. I mean, I know you realize obviously, but I think that's why this movie merits rewatching, because it's that's the point. Yeah. It doesn't matter whether he's good or bad, or whether you sympathize with him or not. Like I was like you. Obviously, you have sympathy, empathy for the character, but at the same time, he's doing evil things.
Well, that's actually what I like. That it kind of plays with what you're supposed to be, or what you think you're supposed to be expecting.
And then it's
kind of like, all right, well, I'll say that it's even more realistic in that way, because there's just people that are like that.
Yeah.
So it's like, all right, kind of timely, actually.
Yeah, actually, it is. But anyway, let's talk about the characters and the actors. The real stars of the show, of course, are Benicio del Toro and Tommy Lee Jones, taking on the roles of the villain and the hero, respectively. Everybody else kind of just serves to amplify the plot. We have, a cast of FBI guys and subplot characters and stuff like that, but really these two guys are the focus. That's who we spend most of the time in the movie with. What did you think?
I really liked Two-Face in this. Unfortunately, within the first...
No, my favorite guy was Shakespeare jogging.
Oh, man.
There's a scene with this guy. I didn't even notice this the first time, but There's a really weird jogger in the scene all of a sudden, and he looks like Shakespeare. But
It
anyway,
does
it has
look-
nothing to do with
Looks
this.
like Shakespeare with short shorts, and it completely destroyed the immersion of the scene.
It did. Anyway, Shakespeare aside.
Shakespeare was pretty great. I really liked LT, as they call him.
Tommy Lee Jones'
He's
character.
pretty great. It is weird to see him in such a capable like action man, I guess. I will say that it's not an action. I wouldn't say it's an action movie. There's a lot of chases. I'll say like freaking 60%, like 70% of the movie is a chase, basically.
Yeah.
Which I can kind of see someone thinking is plotless and kind of like I think if you're in the wrong mood, this movie can be boring.
Yeah.
Because of how much it kind of like
indulges in one thing.
Yeah, and like if you're not digging it, you could just be like, okay, this is lame. Thankfully, within like the opening, weirdly within the opening scene, I was weirdly like captivated. So I kind of dug that. I was like, all right, this is cool. I kind of want to see where this goes. But that's mostly because of the characters.
Yeah, it does.
I like that segue back to because I got off track.
No, but you're absolutely right. It does a really good job at the beginning of the movie of giving you a feel for both of the characters and where they stand.
They
at
have
that
their own
precise
little
moment.
intros, both of them.
Yeah,
separate.
and they don't run it to the ground. You know, we see Benicio del Toro's character in Kosovo and the horrors he saw and participated in. Then we cut to him having bad dreams back in the States, having bad dreams about it. And it's just implied, period. Yeah. You know, that's it. And then we cut to Tommy Lee Jones' character, and we get a brief feel for what he stands for and what he's about. And then it's a chase all of a sudden, you know. And it's brilliant because it goes back to that kind of minimalist feeling, you know. It's about what it's about.
The movie has a very weird feel. It kind of feels like it was made a lot longer ago than it is.
Yeah, but visually it's still kind of like
it's
in its time.
It's still very like early 2000s looking at times. But I'll say even visually it kind of has like a weird like detached feeling. Which I thought helped a lot because it's almost instantly you feel that.
Yeah.
So I was kind of like, all right, this is an interesting feeling for a movie, and that kind of like helped me go through without losing interest, I should say.
Yeah.
Despite the fact that like the whole movie's a chase scene, and it could have easily gone to like, all right, this is getting old.
Transformers territory. We're just numb. Yeah. But it doesn't, and that credit goes a lot to these actors who, despite being in the perpetual fucking chase, managed to evoke and emote a lot of their character substance. Sometimes even just by looks and, you know, silences and confrontations with each other. You know, even this is a great sequence, I thought. There's a scene towards the end of the second act where right before the final chase where we get a grasp on the training between the two. Yeah. And without ever saying it, just with looks and with the bond that they share on screen, you understand that there was something of father-son relationship between them, you know, and it's just in the way they interact. There's nothing ever said, nothing like that, you know. So a lot of credit to these guys, and I think Tommy Lee Jones is the badass, right? I mean, it's like the guy that you're like, I want to be that guy.
Yeah.
But Benicio del Toro does an exceptional job of walking that line, I should say, between light and dark. You know, again, he does evoke empathy. He does evoke sympathy.
Yeah.
And at the same time, revulsion. And that's hard to do, man. That's really hard to do. And his quiet demeanor kind of has both the quality of being, you know, likable and at the same time kind of menacing.
Yeah.
You know? Big kudos to them. If I had to one complaint about the actors, it would be, and it's not even a complaint. It's just compared to all the other people. I don't even know her name. The chick that plays the ASAC agent, the one in charge of the investigation.
Yeah.
She was a little bit wooden, but
not too bad.
But not too bad, you know. Whatever. It's just,
you know, one of the kids wasn't great.
You know, they're kids. Yeah. What are you gonna do? Shoot them? Probably.
Maybe.
We've established that we will shoot a kid. But anyway, now let's talk about
this week's episode brought to you by shooting kids in the face. We do it.
let's talk about the action in this movie. Now, like you said, it's not so much action in terms of fight sequences and explosions and shit, but it is like a suspenseful action. You know, a constant chase, stunt work. What did you think?
Well, it's not. It's like you say, it's not super. What people now would say exciting.
Yeah, it's not stylized.
There's no like, you're not gonna see Tommy Lee Jones freaking parkouring up walls and shit. But it is kind of grounded, and I kind of dug it because it made all the set pieces more interesting.
Yeah.
It does take a long time, some of the stuff, and I could kind of see someone who's not digging it being like, oh man, hurry up. But I liked it. I liked all that stuff. So yeah, it's good. I really liked it. Tommy Lee Jones is surprisingly good in this.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure he used stuntmen and shit, but it looked like he was doing a lot of stuff himself.
Yeah, a lot of the stuff is him. In fact, the only noticeable time where you see a stunt double, I mean, I'm sure they were all over the place, but
yeah,
the only noticeable time you see one is when he's the final knife fight at the end, which we'll get to right now. They do an overhead shot, and it's clearly somebody else.
Yeah,
but that's the only time you really stands out.
There is a very obvious dummy at one point when he falls.
Into the waterfall. Yeah. But what are you gonna do? Throw an old man or anybody into a waterfall?
True.
No, probably not.
But yeah, I actually I really liked how it kind of gave you. I mean, you just it was more like a visual cue of that. You know, this old asshole is not gonna be able to be doing much because he's an old asshole, right? But then it kind of impresses you and what he does do, and then it's kind of it's interesting to see like basically a younger version of himself, and him, he's basically hunting himself in a way.
Yeah,
and it's kind of it's very interesting because they both have like basically the same skill set. Mm-hmm. Only this guy's kind of like hampered by age. Visually, it's not. I wouldn't say it's like they never really say it, but
which leads to this. Fucking cataclysmic knife fight at the end. And that's where you really see it because he's reined in by his reluctance to actually kill, the whole thing. Now, he bears that responsibility. And I think it's still towards the end of the second act, at the beginning of the third act, that he really shoulders it on himself. I'm going to stop this guy because I'm responsible for him. And this leads to this knife fight, which is interesting. But I don't know if you noticed this, but at the beginning, the hunt is in nature. Then it goes to the city, which Tommy Lee Jones' character refers to as a jungle.
Yeah.
And then it goes into a combination of nature and the city, the dregs of the city. And that's the last fight takes place in this locale. And it's pretty fucking brutal, man. And this is really where we see Tommy Lee Jones' age actually come into play. Yeah. Once he's actually saddled that responsibility, it actually does hamper him. He is as skilled as this other guy, but he's old, and he takes a fucking shitload of damage. And, spoiler alert, bad guy loses, so to speak. And he finally and it's just one blow that takes down the bad guy.
Which, again, I could totally see someone being like, that's it?
Mm-hmm.
But I liked it.
I remember when I first saw it, and I think that this was the case for the guy that viewed with me, but when I first saw it, I remember thinking, oh man, these FBI agents are going to come in and save him. It just felt like they just were, because he'd been hampered by them before, and it felt like this was going to be a theme that repeated.
Yeah.
But he does get that final blow, but it's kind of like that last ditch effort kind of thing. So it is fulfilling in that sense that we understand that it could have ended there for him. It should have ended there for him, but But anyway, yeah, overall, I mean, again, a very unique style. Yeah. I should say it's a style that's not done anymore, really.
Yeah, it's kind of like, this is not a good comparison, but in the way that in how it's kind of structured it reminded me of They Live, in that there's no dialogue a lot of the time. Yeah. And then you have like extended scenes where you're like, this should suck at this point.
But it doesn't.
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's not a great comparison, but it did remind me of that. Yeah, I liked it. Now, I will say that when it comes to the knife fight, I actually liked their first confrontation more.
Mm-hmm.
Because there was more like mystery behind it, I guess. So it was a lot more interesting to me. That being said, yeah, final fight was pretty great. Yeah.
Now the final thing we'll talk about. I'm sorry. The second final thing we'll talk about is the score. Real briefly, again, it's very barren. You know, almost it's there, but it's almost like if you're watching this in silence.
I would have actually kind of dug it a little more if they had used it less, because the movie feels like there is no score, even though there is a score.
Yeah,
and it's constantly
right.
there, but you kind of ignore it.
Yeah,
and it kind of fits. It would have been a lot more effective without that much of a score. But it is there. It's like there throughout the whole movie. It's just you kind of ignore it weirdly because you're kind of into the movie and not noticing the music, which is weird. Except for a couple of times, especially when the Predator one, I was like, all right.
Yeah. It is. It does have that odd feeling, and I don't know if it's attributed more to the score or how immersive the experience is.
Yeah.
Or it could be both. But it does seem to fade in and out. Like when you need it, it was there, and when
it's weird.
Know? But
again, I would have actually kind of dug it if it had less of a score, kind of like a No Country or something like that, where it just kind of is silent and it kind of gives it more of a uneasy feeling. But at the same time, my mind kind of did that alone.
Yeah.
So I was like, all right.
So yeah, it's a very unique experience to watch it like that and try to remember the fucking music. But anyway, it wasn't intrusive, and it sure as hell didn't hamper anything. So I guess it's good.
Yeah.
And the final thing we'll talk about is the overall visual look. We've kind of touched on it, but there are these themes. You know, the first chunk of the movie has a very green.
Well, we start off with basically red.
Well, yeah, we do have the red war-torn world of Kosovo at the beginning that gives us a good peek into the mind of Benicio del Toro's character. Then we go into the more natural, barren winter age, coming to the end of his life cycle setting that introduces us to Tommy Lee Jones' character as he lives in British Columbia, and it's snowing. You know, so there's a lot there implied in the scenery. You know, we have a man that's literally raging and war-torn in his head, and another man at the end of his ears. And then it goes into the jungle setting, or I should say the forest setting, where it's much more of a hunt, a predator and prey type of thing. And then we get that same feeling again in the concrete jungle, as it were. And then it all comes meshed together at the end. I thought that was fucking amazing, man. Again, yet another reason people should revisit this movie and go, oh, wow, there's a lot more to this than it implies. We go back to that at the beginning. It gives you the impression of something else, but it's really this other thing, which is amazing to me. But anyway,
yeah, I could totally understand someone, especially first viewing, being like let down a little because I don't want to say it's anything against the movie, but it's us as an audience are expecting something.
Yeah.
And then when you don't get that, you can feel like burned.
Yeah.
That being said, I was like, okay, this is gonna be different, just because it has a weird, like a very detached feeling. The movie, so it kind of prepared me. It's like, oh, this is gonna be different. So there was never that like disappointment that I'm sure many people felt. And yeah, it's something else. It's not what it's presenting itself as.
I think you bring up an interesting point. Ultimately, I think the reason both fans of Friedkin and the general audience did not really take to this movie was Friedkin fans were expecting something deep, a la his other stuff, right?
I think this is in a different way. Though,
yes, exactly.
Very barren, kind of.
The framework it's presented in is very by the numbers.
Yeah.
But there is depth there. It's just the framework gives you that different impression. And whereas the general audience was expecting some, rip-roaring action, and they get something completely different, yet it's still in that same framework. So both of them were deceived because they were expecting something else. But they were both literally getting what they asked for. Yeah. It was just presented, like you say, in a very unique fashion.
Yeah. Again, I don't want to make the comparison, but you know how in that part in No Country where Josh Brolin dies,
yeah,
and your entire understanding of the movie
Yeah,
goes
yeah,
out
yeah.
the window. This is kind of that way when there isn't a revelation and there isn't a justification for you liking this character, and it's just what it's just this other thing.
It's just life.
Yeah,
Even though, again, a lot of these situations are wild. Like the chase scenes, obviously in real life, chase scenes are not like that.
yeah,
But again, that plays with your expectations and
yeah,
so many
because
levels.
it makes you expect something and then it doesn't happen. And you're kind of like, whoa. Except for in the case of No Country, you still had a quarter of a movie to
Yeah.
go, so you kind of had that like, that adjustment time afterwards. This one is literally like, hey, what you were expecting doesn't happen, and then the movie ends.
Mm-hmm.
So someone might be like, what?
Yeah.
This sucks. I disagree though.
Yes, and I do too. I think this should be a cult classic at the very least. Revisit this movie if you've seen it already and you didn't like it, or if you liked it, see it again, because I liked it even more this time and realized exactly why it left an impression on me. And if you haven't seen this movie, this is definitely one to check the fuck out, And again,
Maybe
don't go in with expectations,
Yeah.
and don't think what it's feeding you is actually what it's feeding you, because it's something unique.
It's interesting to me. It kind of came off as, I don't know if it was or not, but it kind of came off as intentionally misleading you.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there is definitely design behind what was done here, and I agree with you wholeheartedly on that. There is just too much laid out before you that feeds that idea to dismiss it as it was not intentional, because I believe it was, and for that reason, it works wonderfully. Check it out. Tell us what you think. Are we right? Are we wrong?
It's on Hulu.
It is on Hulu at the time, so there's no reason if you do have Hulu to not see it.
Nazis.
Yeah, just said that for no reason. But anyway, this has been Ahab and the Goontek talking about The Hunted. Should it be a cult classic? Let us know. Like, share, subscribe, and we're out.